Hey folks, my plan for this video was to present a completely unbiased account of the American election campaign with the emphasis on Pennsylvania. However, over the past few days, the Democratic campaign, which was never very good to begin with, has gone from bad to worse, and now it seems in some areas to be in free fall. We could be looking at a landslide for Donald Trump. Now, I'm not saying that this is certain. It's not certainly not odds on even, but it is a distinct possibility. And nothing that the Democrats come up with seems to make the situation any better. Let's look at some of the reasons why. There are five groups mainly who make up the Democrat voting coalition, and four of those groups are either falling out of line or have completely fallen out already. What are those four groups? Let's go through them. Start with the first one, Black Americans. Since the New Deal in the North and the civil rights movement in the South, blacks have voted Democrat. They're the most consistent Democrat voters. Well over 90% voted Democrat. Now, thanks to cackling Kamala, an estimated 20% of black males are either going to vote for Trump or will not vote at all. Why? One reason I think is that Kamala Harris is not really a black politician. She's only black when she wants to be. God knows what her background is. But she's certainly not a ghetto politician. You can't really see her making a rabble-rousing speech in Harlem or Watts. As a prosecutor, she pushed hard for tough sentences for convicted criminals, many of whom were black. So you're asking young black men, we'll assume they're young black men, to go and vote for somebody who probably would have wanted to send them to prison just a few years ago. That's asking a bit much. The fact that she changes her accent every now and again, depending on the audience she's with, and doesn't sound very convincing, no matter how she speaks, is another issue. I think the main issue with Harris, as far as young black men is concerned, is that she's the woman who tried to put so many blacks behind bars. Second group, pretty much guaranteed to vote Democrat, historically, Hispanics. Hispanics are falling out of line quite dramatically. To have the vote in the United States, you have to be an American national, obviously. So all those Hispanics who are now going to vote for Trump are American. They see these, frankly, wetbacks coming into the country, giving the whole Hispanic community a bad name, and they wonder why nothing's being done about it. New Mexico is a state, it's the only state that has a Hispanic majority. And 4 years ago, it was solid for the Democrats. It's still going to vote Democrat, but the majority is going to be less. And the reason the majority is going to be less is that the border is not being controlled. If you're a legal Hispanic, an American voter of Hispanic background, your family came over and filled in the paperwork and became American. You resent these people trying to essentially jump the queue. How many will vote Trump? I don't know. But Harris can't afford to lose voters. And with blacks and now Hispanics, she's losing. Okay, what about the third group? Third group, we'll call them the unskilled, semi-skilled, industrial working class. In the north, big cities, Detroit, places like that. Detroit is Michigan, of course, and there's a small town in Michigan that makes Pyrex ware, and it's due to close. So America is losing a factory where you don't have to have a university degree to work, where there is a union and you get healthcare as part of the package of employment for that place. It's going to close. It's going to move to one state over, so it's not the end of the world, but nevertheless, a solid union job is going to go, and that will leave this town with a factory that makes sandwiches. Big deal. People got to eat ready-made sandwiches, so they tell me. Yeah, the problem is this factory doesn't employ Americans. It employs Haitian refugees. So the town is now flooded by Haitians who don't speak English. They don't speak French either. They speak a curious dialect of French. It's Creole French. And the people are, needless to say, upset about this. So again, this comes back to not controlling the borders. Basically letting anyone in. Same thing's happening in Britain, let's be honest. But the Americans have a chance to stick the middle finger up to the politicians that are not controlling the border. Trump, of course, has a plan to control the border. You may not like his plan, but if it's implemented, the border will be controlled. If your main aim is to get the border controlled, you're a semi-skilled worker in a northern factory, Donald Trump comes over as the perfect choice for you. Maybe for the first time in your life, you will vote Republican. Finally, the biggest group of all, and the one that the Democrats cannot afford to lose, but I think have lost, because this group really can change elections, are the group that we would call the skilled working class. Now, the Americans call them the hard hats. These are men who do industrial work. They're highly skilled. They're plumbers, they're electricians, they're carpenters. They work with tools and their hands and use their skills. They are very well paid. Many of them are now self-employed. Historically, they were an integral part of the Democrat voting corps going right back to the 19th century. Because if you really want to be specific about them, they are the ethnic white working class. So they are Irish American, Italian American, Irish American, Italian American, Polish American. They came over in the 19th century. They helped build those cities, and they turned those cities into solid Democrat-controlled fiefdoms run by the Democratic Party machine. They're also incredibly patriotic. In May 1970, a bunch of students were marching through Manhattan, opposition to the Vietnam War. They came up against an army of hard hatters who were building the World Trade Center. And many of those hard hatters had fought in the Second World War, in Korea, and in the younger ones would have fought in Vietnam. They were not going to tolerate these students trying to avoid the sacrifices that they had been forced to make. So, because I think they knew that this wasn't really about opposition to the war in Vietnam. This was about opposition to those students, precious little souls, having to join the army and run the risk, along with the hard hatters, of getting blown sky high. If anybody doubts that, look at the wars America has fought since Vietnam with an entire volunteer army. The middle class, as always, don't give a stuff about anything other than themselves. So this was the middle class trying to avoid Vietnam. And for the hard hatters, who probably didn't support Vietnam either, this was about a bunch of middle class students hoping that America would be defeated. The hard hatters may not have supported the war in Vietnam, but they certainly supported President Nixon's idea of peace with honor. So they set to work and kicked 7 colours of shit out of the hard hatters, out of the students. And Nixon then invited the union leaders to the White House, where they presented him with a hard hat. And if you go to the Nixon Museum today, the Presidential Library, you can see the hard hat that he was presented with in 1970 on display. Fast forward to 1984, and Ronnie Reagan won 49 states out of 50. Walter Mondale managed to take, I think it was Minnesota, with 10 votes. And the District of Columbia with 3. So he got 13 electoral votes. Everything else went to Ronnie. And that was in no small measure due to the fact that the hard hats turned out mob-handed to vote for Ronnie. Now, they were called Reagan Democrats. They're no longer Democrats. They're now Trump Republicans. And I think their influence will change the Republican Party. It will become much more populist and, dare I say it, much more plebeian. If you doubt that, Republican convention recently, the president of the Teamsters Union, the Teamsters are the guys who drive the heavy goods vehicles, the president of the Teamsters Union turned up and addressed the Republican convention. No, I can't believe it either, but it happened. So what Harris is left with really is the 5th group, and it's the only one that's staying loyal to her, and that is the progressive middle class intelligentsia. The people who do the white collar jobs, the people who don't really work for a living, in other words, but are well paid for doing it. The bloody women who work in the human resources department at some company and who basically make the lives of the workers, the men, it's mainly men, who do the real physical work difficult. She's not going to win an election with a bunch of people like that. It's just not enough. Am I certain that this will come to pass? That Trump will win? No. But I've got a feeling with each day that passes that he will. Now think on.